Thanks for joining me for this presentation, Migrating Technical Content from Word to DITA with Adobe FrameMaker, something that we hope you'll be able to use as a step-by-step guide. My name's Matt Sullivan. I'm the owner of TechCom Tools, and you can find me at matt@techcomtools.com and also visit the website of the same address. I've written a couple of books on FrameMaker, a couple of workbooks on using structured FrameMaker, and I've been a certified expert, instructor, and professional in a lot of things, but especially in FrameMaker since about the mid-90s. So I've been doing this quite a bit. Adobe's asked me to put this together as a step-by-step guide. So this is not going to be the world's deepest dive into DITA technologies and all of the wrenches that you can turn to make these things do what you want. But if you're a current Microsoft Word user and you need to get technical content moved into DITA and edited with FrameMaker and perhaps eventually with Adobe Experience Manager, then you're probably in the right spot. Even if you are a little deeper with your knowledge, you're probably going to find a lot of things here interesting and useful, so I hope you stick around. I always like to mention two quick resources. Not quick as in shallow, but quick as in easy to get to and incredibly useful. The first is community.adobe.com. And when you visit there, you can see that if you check the technical communication and e-learning checkbox, you're able to click directly on FrameMaker, where there are some 13,000 conversations going. I've been active on these forums for quite some time. In fact, you can see that I've read something like 34,000 messages and replied 2,600 times. I think recently I was marked correct in a solution for one of the people here, and that's kind of what we're looking for, is being able to find solutions for the problems that you as FrameMaker and DITA users or regular FrameMaker users on this forum have. So we want to make sure that you're well taken care of. Now, the other resource that I want to point out, YouTube, may be where you found this video. If you're registered with Adobe for the webinar presentation, then you may not be aware that these generally do get posted onto Adobe's YouTube site. So at Adobe TCS is what you're looking for there. And you can see that if you go to playlists, there are lots of categories for lots of different things. You'll find videos that I've done inside of RoboHelp Essentials. There's a picture of me. I happen to do this one with the panda on the front. And then I've done a lot of the new feature videos as well. And then I've got one of my clients right here that was helpful in creating the AEM or Adobe Experience Manager connector, what is now AEM guides. They were the kind of the test bed for putting that together. So that was a lot of fun too. There are two videos that you might want to check out in addition to what you're looking at today. The first is something that we did a couple of years ago, From Word to DITA, Surfing the Structured Content Wave. And then a few months ago in this series, we did a Word to DITA webinar. And this has a lot of background information and kind of lets you understand where things are at, why you might want to go to DITA, etc. So that's worth checking out as well. If you're here right now, you probably don't need a lot of convincing to move to a solution that is more robust than Microsoft Word. Fortunately for both of us, Adobe's already put together a white paper, and you can get to that white paper through this ever so cumbersome URL. You can go ahead and take a picture or a screenshot of this right now, but I will try and come back to it after I go over the PDF itself. Organizations are moving away from Microsoft Word for technical documentation due to inefficiencies and high costs. As documentation demands grow, companies must optimize production efficiency. Specialized tools offer better ROI and reduced costs. Sophisticated documentation needs digital, interactive, and mobile content. Technical documentation is shifting to digital formats like HTML5 and EPUB, augmenting print and static PDFs. Mobile adoption demands adaptive content, while rich media enhances user engagement. Companies look for efficiency through structured authoring and content reuse. Structured authoring improves consistency, reduces formatting time, and streamlines content reuse. XML-based standards like DITA enable multi-format publishing and lower translation costs, though migration requires careful planning. Standardized templates and content management are key. Using standardized templates and writing guidelines ensures consistency and reduces formatting time. A content management system, or CMS, further enhances efficiency, but its success depends on a solid content strategy. Adobe's Technical Communication Suite gives you an excellent way to move away from Microsoft Word. Word lacks structured authoring and content management features. Adobe's Technical Communication Suite with FrameMaker and RoboHelp supports structured and unstructured authoring, single sourcing, and CMS integration. A phased migration, including training and template development, ensures a smooth transition, improving efficiency and cost effectiveness. If needed, and what you'll see today, is that there's a direct route to take Microsoft Word files directly into DITA and start authoring inside of FrameMaker right away. You probably noticed earlier that I snuck a short link into the web address where you can find this PDF. Even so, I promised to give you the long address again at the end of this rundown of the PDF, and here also is the short link in case you don't feel like typing quite so much. So FrameMaker is better, but how do we get there? Well, there's two paths, and one is a longer-term path, and it's the subject of another installment in this series that we're going to do in a couple of months. That involves going from Microsoft Word files into unstructured FrameMaker, working in an environment that's quite similar to unstructured Word, but gives you the kind of control and options that we need and we want within our documentation. The other way we're going to look at today, and that's going directly from Microsoft Word files, converting using an internal utility in FrameMaker, and then editing that DITA content directly inside of Frame. As promised in the webinar title, we do have a step-by-step guide for you to accompany the webinar itself. I've put it together in Microsoft Word, and I've done that so that we can show the conversion of this document into DITA. But this is a bit more complex than I want to start with. So we're going to start with this simple document that's got some titles and some lists in it, and everything in here is using the default style sheet that goes with Microsoft Word. I've got a title here, a heading 1 here, some generated lists down here, and so on. When everything is standardized like this, it's very simple to convert this content over into DITA. First, you need to make sure that you have the structure menu. If you don't, you need to go into Edit, Preferences, and ensure that you've got Structured FrameMaker and not simply FrameMaker or Unstructured FrameMaker listed in the preferences themselves. I can back out of this, but if I had to change to Structured FrameMaker, I would have to exit and then restart FrameMaker to enable that interface. Next, under the Structure menu, I'm going to go down to Utilities and choose Convert Word docx to DITA. I need to identify my document and then hit Select. The style to tag map that I have selected here assumes that I'm using the default Microsoft Word style sheet. If not, you might have to go in and edit the XML to add the tag names for what you use as style names inside of Microsoft Word so that you can map them over to their corresponding parts within DITA. And the only other thing that I need is my output directory. Right now, I've chosen a very simple file to convert. And what I'm going to do is show you a couple of other simple translations so that you can see how these files nest and stack within FrameMaker or within your Windows operating system. Here you can see that I've got a Word import files directory. I've also got a separate DITA output directory, and that DITA output directory, I've created an individual directory for each one of my conversion projects. For now, don't worry about this. We'll talk about this after conversion. I'll grab my Olympic summary, hit OK, recheck my work. My Olympic summary is going to use my default Microsoft Word styles, and I'm going to write those files to the Olympics summary output directory. I hit convert. It only takes a few seconds to convert those files. And you can see that I end up with a log file, a DITA map, and topics. If I now open that Olympics summary DITA map, and if I go back to FrameMaker and I open up that Olympics summary DITA map, you can see that the DITA map looks much like a FrameMaker book file, and it's broken my content up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 topics. Looking at the individual topics, or selecting all of these files and opening them at one time, we see that the FrameMaker authoring template has been applied to them. I can edit my content, and then I can save and then publish my content as needed. Let's go through and look at that again. First, I'll close out of my existing stuff. Go back to the structure menu item, utilities, convert Word to DITA, change my source location to basketball rules, still using my defaults, set my output location, and then convert. Just like before, it should only take a few seconds to convert. And it shows me my DITA map and my topics. Now, if you're wondering why I'm not double-clicking on this DITA map right here, I have multiple versions of FrameMaker on my machine. There's no problem with that, but my default for this would be opening into FrameMaker 2020, which is not exactly what I want. So I'm going to come back here, open this up, open up my DITA map, just like before, I've got my DITA map, looks like a book, and I've got a series of DITA topics right here. That's working out well, but there's just not a lot of content here. So while we're doing some really, really cool things, let's see what happens when we mix it up a little bit. I'm going to hold my Shift key and go to the File menu, allowing me to close all open files. I'll save my changes. And then for a third time, come back, Structure, Utilities, Convert Word Document to DITA. This time bringing in my Converting Word to DITA document. I'm still using my same default styles. I'll change my output directory. Hit OK. And convert. It should still be a fairly short conversion. But at this point, because I am bringing in content that has some more unexpected things, I've got some URL links in there. I've got some placed graphics. I've got tables. There may be any number of things that you're bringing in from Microsoft Word. And occasionally, the way that you work, the manner in which you work in Microsoft Word, may dictate whether or not this stuff processes into DITA with FrameMaker and this utility. For example, when I was putting together this presentation, I inadvertently copied my title paragraph verbatim and then duplicated it within the document. That doesn't sound like a huge problem, except that the names of the topics and the DITA maps are based upon the content that exists within the paragraph. So if I had two topics or two paragraphs that say converting word to DITA, this happens to be the file name, but if I go into the topics, if I have two things that when parsed create the exact same DITA file name, then I'll probably run into an error because I'm trying to write the same file twice with different pieces of information. So when you're doing your conversion, check closely with what you're doing, and if you end up with problems with conversion, start breaking your content up into smaller and smaller Word files until you can identify things that process properly. That will give you a technique that will get you through that conversion process and allow you to identify the sorts of things that will or might break the conversion into DITA itself. Let's go ahead and open up that larger DITA map. And look at this. Clearly, we've got more context within this document than we had within the others. I've got my DITA map here, and then I've got first, second, and third level topics that are nested within the doc. I can edit each of these individually, and when these things are output as part of a DITA map, you will get entirely different formatting, indenting, etc. that will be applied to these topics when you go to a PDF, or you'll end up with different breaks when you go to an HTML file. All of it gives you a lot of control. It's more than you need to understand right now, but it's excellent to know that you do have an extended ramp that you can use to manage your content. Now that this is all DITA, now that these are all individual topics, these can be managed within a server environment. They also could go directly into a content management system and be used or reused as needed across one or more of your company's documents. Let's take a look at what our converted DITA content looks like when we go to PDF. Going into an open topic, I'm going to ensure that this is my active document. Then I'm going to go to File, Publish, which is the optimal way to produce PDF in all the latest FrameMaker versions. I'm going to make sure I'm converting the current document, just this one topic. I'm going to choose PDF. I've got a default settings file identified, and I'm going to choose my output directory. While I have my DITA conversion output directory up here, I'm actually going to create another folder. Because I want to show you how FrameMaker helps you organize your published content without having to select a different directory every time you publish. And now I can either double click on PDF to create that output, or having selected PDF, I can do a single click on generate this selected output. I'll go ahead and view that output. And the file opens up in Acrobat, looking basically like what I saw when I looked at it within the authoring template inside of FrameMaker. But let's look at something interesting. This topic has a different context in terms of the converting word to DITA map. If I select my DITA map and then do the exact same thing that I did with the individual topic, go ahead and process that. Get past this dialog box. The nesting within the DITA map and the templates that are used for DITA map output will dramatically change how my content is provided, how it is represented in the PDF document. I view output, and if you look closely, this sophisticated documentation phrase, which is the heading, which is the top of this PDF, is actually nested on the first page within my document. Rather than a heading level 1, we'll say it's a heading 1, 2, 3, 4. Because of that contextual relationship, it gets a different level of significance than if it was output as its own topic. Of course, if you weren't already wondering where the formatting for the single topic came from, that's the sophisticated documentation doc right here, the formatting for the PDF right here, and for the authoring, you probably were wondering where in the world we got the formatting for the concatenated or contextual version of the content. So let's take a look at those. We need to do a couple of things. Back in FrameMaker, I'll go ahead and open up that topic again. I'm going to get some things out of the way. And then we're going to take a peek under the hood at where we get or where we identify the template for the authoring that we're looking at on the screen right now. In the Structure menu, so again, you need to be in Structured FrameMaker. If I look at my application definition item and edit my global application definitions, this brings up a document that has lots of definitions for things that I might be able to edit right now inside of FrameMaker. These are different content models, basically. If I look at this structure view item, we can see that there are a lot of DITA definitions. And we happen to be using DITA 1.3. Now, the one I need to look at right now is a DITA 1.3 concept. And how do I know that that's what I need to look at? Well, if I go back into this document right here, with my cursor in this document, looking at my structure view, which I'll cover a little bit later, I can see that my topmost element is concept. How did I know that I'm working with DITA 1.3? If I look at my welcome screen, you can see that right here, we've got DITA 1.3 as our current version. If I wanted another one, I could click here and I could change it. Moving back to the struct apps file, back into the DITA 1.3 concept, we can see that right here is a line that discusses or defines the template. I'll zoom this down just a bit, and we can see that this file, which is located in FrameMaker's structure directory, it's a special construct, it's a variable right there. And if I locate the concept.template.fm, I can modify that and I can add headers and footers. I can make changes to the formatting, saving it back in that same place, and then future concepts will use that authoring template anytime a file is opened into FrameMaker. Now that's the authoring template. I'll go ahead and leave this open for right now. To look at my publishing template, I'm going to go back to File, Publish, and then I'm going to open up and edit my settings file. I've got my options for all my different outputs, including an option when I'm looking at my PDF options to define my DITA template. This gives me all of the different files that are defined for formatting and presenting this information as PDF. A lot of the files that are listed here are actually in use when you choose to save your DITA map as a book. Now, what I mean by that is if you go to DITA options, there's the option to save PDF via book with components route. And you can see all of these things here. A lot of these are, when you click on this, these are all available to apply. But these all correspond with a lot of the names that you've got over in here. So instead of going with the chapter output here, which is part of the chapter output for the book files, instead we're going to go to the database 1.3 template file. I'm going to export that. And I'll save that database 1.3 template in my outputs directory, along with some stuff I was doing with the chapter output template. I'll hit save. I'll confirm that I'm not saving PDF with components. Save and close. Open up my database 1.3 template. And I'll make a quick change to my master page. Just put a black rectangle right here. Copy that. And hit paste. Save that database 1.3 template. Go back to my body pages. Back to the Publish panel. My PDF options, my DITA template, database 1.3, import. Of course, I can use any file, but this one works quite well. Save and close. Confirm that we're on the DITA map. Create my PDF. And view my output. And there you go. There's your black bar right there. You can see that both left and right pages have gotten that black bar. So that database 1.3 file is the file that I need to modify when I'm outputting a DITA map to PDF. Let's take a shortcut and let's do that same thing, but we'll do it to the FrameMaker with book components. If I come through and edit, and I go to my DITA options, and I choose to save PDF via book with components route, I can choose to generate or not generate any of these things. I will apply my output templates. Go back to my DITA template. I'm going to go back to my chapter output template. I'm going to import. And I'm just going to use this same file because it's got the master pages that I'm looking for. The file names aren't as important as the definitions that are contained within them. So my chapter output is now set for that file. Save and close. Confirm that I've got my DITA map active, and double-click on PDF. And reprocess the file. Now, one thing to note, within my DITA map, which is actually a book map within the DITA map within the structure view, I'll show that in just a second, you can see that I've got I've got a number of files that are at the highest level. And those are the files that are going to receive those master page changes from my chapter output template. I'll show you what that means in just a second. There's my temporary book showing up with all my different chapter files. You might have seen a weird flash right there with the bar right there from the temp file from one of those files. When I view output, this is a little curious. I get my black bar, but I get it on my bookmarks at the highest level. So while the page with introduction has a black bar, I go down and I get the next heading 2 with a black bar. My 2.1 is not a chapter head, therefore it didn't get my chapter template, therefore it doesn't have the black bar. So depending on how you set up your conversion, depending on the things that you instruct FrameMaker to produce, you need to identify the templates are going to apply to that, and you need to modify those accordingly. It's really not tough to figure out which template is applying to which component. Just takes a little bit of time. Go ahead and write things down and make sure that you get them applied appropriately and then modified, exported, and then re-imported appropriately. In an earlier example, when we were looking at PDF, we were talking about the DITA template files. And I mentioned that a lot of these files are things that have to do with a temporarily created book with components route. So when we save the PDF with book with components, when this is checked, we have the ability to create all of these things as a temporary file, process into a FrameMaker book with these components, customized or not, add these templates to our content. But FrameMaker gives us another opportunity to manage our content without using that temporary file. And in fact, if when you're looking at a DITA map, this doesn't entirely make sense, we can get to something that looks even more like a FrameMaker book. With our DITA map active, you can go to File, Save DITA map as, and then choose Book with FM Components. When I click on Save, it's going to process my book with FM components. Since this process takes a couple of minutes, I'll come back after the processing's done. And now we see at the conclusion of that processing that we have a separate book file and that this book has a very similar structure to the DITA map. But now we do have explicit things like a title and a TOC. Notice also that instead of using DITA files, we're now using .fm files. And while they are FrameMaker files, they are structured FrameMaker files, and they do contain DITA content. So for instance, if I open up one of these, kind of my favorite sample so far, and I select text within the document, looking at my structure view, you can see I still have a concept with a title, with a con body, with a paragraph. So I've retained the DITA content. I'm just managing it in a different way. It's important to remember that the content is the same effectively between these two books, but the overall structure of a DITA map may fit one organization's requirements better than another's, and that other organization might benefit from using a book map. And you can see here, converting word to DITA.DITA and converting word to DITA.book are two ways with naming conventions you can see one versus the other. Let's look now at publishing the PDF from the book map. Either converting a book map directly or converting a DITA map using the convert to book, we can get about the same results. In this case, because I'm using the book map, I'll edit. This no longer really applies because I'm starting with a FrameMaker book structure. So I'll just uncheck that. I'll make sure that my book map is active. And I'll change the source document back to current, just to confirm that this is the file that we're going to be processing. And then I'll double click to process that PDF. I'll view the output. Looking back at my bookmarks, you can see that the introduction is not using the black bar that we had when we did our DITA output using the temporary book map. And if you're familiar with FrameMaker and template work, you'll see that if you open up this file right here, you've got a fully functional FrameMaker file that you can now edit as needed. This company name variable sits on the master pages. If I open up my variables panel and edit that variable, and we can see the change directly on the cover page. I'll shift over to the master pages. I'll go ahead and remove the outdated FrameMaker mnemonic here. Remove the content with the Adobe logo. And go back to my body pages. So in that way, I have a very tactile way to change any of the files within my book map. Any of my content documents that need changes can be done using one individual template file. So let's say that I'm going to use Introduction to create a template file that I'm going to apply across the rest of my book, or at least across my content documents. We'll make a simple change just like we did before. We'll go to the master pages, and we're going to go with a different color block this time just so we can differentiate. So I'll view my graphics tools, and I'll create a box in the center of the page, making it a solid color. Grab that box, copy it. Confirm that my other master page is now active and hit paste, and the coordinates remain the same as they were from where I copied it on the right page. Back to my body pages, and if I scroll to the top of the page, there's the box exactly where I expected it to be. I'm going to take this introduction file and I'm going to save it as my template, because I'm going to assume that I'm going to make a number of changes, not all of which would apply to the introduction file. And I want to make sure that I've got a third file, or at least a separate file, that I can use to work on my formatting without being very concerned about my content. So I'm going to take this introduction file and I'm going to save it off. Make sure that my document is active. Go to File, Save As. And rather than calling it Introduction, I'll create a new folder, call this Bookmap Templates. And then save my file as template FM inside of there. Now, rather than applying it to all of these files here, I'm just going to show you that I can now go through this set of files right here and apply to more than one file, which is effectively the same as applying to any or all of these files through here. So however you want to select them is great. However many you select is fine. But with these files selected in the book, now I can go to my File menu, File, Import, Formats. I'm going to choose my template file called Template FM, and I can bring in all of these things. Now, in particular, I just want to show that the page layouts is what I'm going to draw across all these pages. And this is a convenient thing to do since this is the only change that I'm doing. You can choose to manage all of your template components in any way you see fit, importing as many or as few of these at a time as you want, and choosing whether to remove overrides as you go. I'm going to bring in the template page layouts, which is my master pages, and I'm going to remove my format and layout overrides. I'm doing that to the 4 documents inside of the summary section right in here, and I'm going to hit import. Okay, so if I look at sophisticated documentation, I now have a bar at the top of that page. Adobe Technical Communication Suite as an alternative, bars at the top. But the pages that I did not import this into, like Word to DITA, this file does not have those changes. So this gives you a very granular way to select all of these things. Remember that creating the book map and then managing that book map as you would a regular FrameMaker book project, that's a choice that's up to you. If you want to go directly from the Word to DITA map file instead, you're free to work with all of this stuff using the Publish panel and your DITA options to create a book with components file, produce any of these on the fly each time you create a PDF, And if you want to, you can go to DITA template, you can export and then change and then import, and then that change will be applied to that portion of the PDF. It's really just up to you to decide how you want to manage that. Being able to publish to HTML5 is a convenient and effective way to get your content into the hands of your users in the form of mobile phones and handheld devices. And I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret. One of the reasons that I went back and showed you how to work with a book map with generated components is that when you're going to HTML5 from FrameMaker, you may run into technical issues with things like JavaScript and JRE, the Java Runtime Environment. I'll show you what I mean. Using my Convert Word to DITA map, let's make sure that we have that selected, confirming that. Current document, and double-clicking on responsive HTML5 to generate, I end up with this failed to publish, check if JRE, Java Runtime Environment, is installed. Now Java, JavaScript, and the Java Runtime Environment is one of those things that a lot of IT directors aren't really happy about keeping up to date or having them installed at all. If you run into this problem and you can't get past getting the JRE installed, just open up or create your book map with components, come right over to the Publish panel, and generate your responsive HTML5. Notice I haven't made any changes yet to the settings for that conversion. So we're just going to go through this, then we'll tighten up the settings a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner, and I'll show you maybe one or two of the options you have available for the skins or the layout that you're going to have for your responsive HTML5 environment. I'm going to view output, do a fit in window, and what I get by default happens to be the Azure skin that comes with FrameMaker. Now this is a responsive skin in that the changing of the width can change the layout of the content. So if this were to be on a cell phone, it might look like this, where my navigation is over in here. But then as I move this and display it on a tablet, I might end up with something that looks like this. And then if I get to a laptop or I have at least a larger window, then I have something that looks like this. It's pretty subtle between the desktop and the tablet right there. You've got your navigation in here. The same options exist. They're just displayed in a different way because this is where you might be holding a tablet that's at that rotation. Going back to the handheld view, you might end up with stuff that is showing up at the bottom here. You've got navigation and whatnot that would be available for a thumb at the bottom rather than a thumb at the sides. Now clearly we have at least a little bit of work to do. We would want to have the responsive HTML5 replaced with the title of our project. Also might want to have a logo right here. Also, we might want to put in a favicon or a favicon that shows up in the tab when we're looking at this through a browser. So we'll take a look at a couple of those things here. I'm going to close out of the output, and then in my Publish panel, move down and edit. I'm going to choose my responsive HTML5 output, and this is where I want to change my title for my project. Converting Word to DITA looks great. Here is the favicon image right here. I'll just grab one that I already have on my machine. And then we'll also look really quick at the Azure Blue. We're going to go ahead and edit this and at least look at the header here. This gives us where converting Word to DITA will show up right in here. That's what's going to happen, but it doesn't update in this preview. This is just a picture. But this is also the logo. And if I click on logo, let's say in some of these things I have very long lists of things that I need to get to. But in the header as well, if I click on logo, see how it jumps to exactly the option that I need. It asks me, or at least lets me know, that there is a blue dot called logo.ping that's been associated with this project. Clicking on my ellipsis, I can go through, I'll pick a different one. This time I'll choose icon ping, which is a little bit different, and I'll go ahead and save. I'll close that, save and close these changes, which are now saved inside the settings.sts that I have loaded. This is why you want to have individual STS files with descriptive names so you can tell the difference. And then we're going to reprocess the HTML5. Viewing output, There we go. So we have our favicon that's been updated right in here. Our logo, which has been updated right here. Those are similar, but they are different files. And then the title, converting Word to DITA. Now I probably should have flipped these two. In fact, I'm going to go do that and show you how easy this is. If I close out of my browser, edit, change the graphic to this one, go into my layout, in my header, change my logo. And this one's more of a jet airplane. It's got a little bit more detail. So at the larger size, this makes sense. Doesn't take long to go through the whole thing. Save and close. Process. And you can do this as many times as you like until you're happy with your output. That's a little bit better. So now we have the smoother, more simplified one here, and you can see the cowlings of the jet engines and whatnot on here. Just about everything in here is modifiable. You've got access to the color of this bar right here, the color of any of the text that you show anywhere inside the doc, the physical icons that show up in here, whether or not those icons do show up, and control of your display of content in the handheld, in the desktop, and in the tablet modes. You even have control over when those layouts switch from one thing to another if you have specific devices for your organization. Now you may notice this converted quite quickly, but mainly because I'm only looking at the content for the book title here. So my current document is what processed, and that's this book title file right here. Coming back over to my book map here, having made all those changes with this test file, now if I double click on responsive HTML5, this is going to take a little bit longer. So I'll be right back when it's done, and then we'll take a look in the browser. Not too bad. It took about 30 seconds. So I'll go ahead and view output. And now we've got a little bit more to work with. My bookmarks are all working. And as you can see, I've got place graphics, I've got working hyperlinks, all of my formatting content here, displayed for a tablet, and displayed for a handheld device. And that Azure and charcoal layout work pretty well. They are, however, what we would call tri-pane help. To make your content the most usable, and to be the most current with what is done in this industry, you might want to go with a frameless layout. So if I come back over, choose to edit, and then within my responsive HTML5, manage my layouts, create a new layout, I've got a frameless layout called Indigo. Selecting that Indigo layout and editing it allows me to come in and do the same sorts of changes that I did to the Azure layout. In fact, I'll come in here and choose logo ping, resetting that to this V3FC logo. I'll go ahead and save, close, get out of my publish settings. I'll make sure that I've got my DITA map or my book map active before I process, and I'll process my project. Once that's done, view my output. See that I've got my 4 main sections. I've got my title. I've got my logo. I've got my favicon. And this time as I move around, it's a little bit less jarring as I go from the handheld to the tablet to the full laptop version. It just adjusts a little bit more cleanly. I can go into any of these topics, and I can look at lots of different things. And with that, our time together today is drawing to a close. So give me just a couple of minutes so we can talk about what it is that we did and what we've got coming up for you. If you go back and review this recording, you find that we started with an overview of some of the Adobe resources like the forums that you can go and get help with both FrameMaker and Structured FrameMaker and DITA. We did a quick overview of a great white paper from Adobe that talks about migrating your content to DITA for editing in either FrameMaker or a content management system like Adobe Experience Manager Guides. But then we went quickly into converting this content and working on it directly inside of FrameMaker. We used the utility that we found underneath the Structure menu to directly convert our Microsoft Word content into DITA topics using default paragraph styles. We looked at what the DITA content was that was created and how DITA maps can represent the links between these different documents. We also had a great overview of publishing to PDF using the Publish panel and a pretty deep dive into editing both the DITA-specific templates that you can use when publishing and editing FrameMaker files that can control the formatting for things like a book map printed to PDF as well. And of course, we wrapped up by looking at HTML5 output, both in our traditional tri-pane format, which is kind of an older look, and in FrameMaker's available frameless output. We went through a lot. So let me give you a few resources that you can use for any questions that you have moving forward. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally, you can always email me at matt@techcomtools.com. And you've also got my mobile number at the bottom in case you just want to send me a text. And if you've got your phone or a screen capture utility handy, I've put together a couple of QR codes and URLs that you can use to get information as well. The first is my website, techcomtools.com. That alone will get you to most of the things that I'm going to cover in these next couple of slides. If you're looking for online courses, you can find plenty on Structured FrameMaker and FrameMaker in general at courses.techcomtools.com. That'll bring you to this site where you've got introductory information as well as things even beyond what we've done here. I've also got an online store where you can arrange for live online or in-person training, as well as purchase the reference books that I make for both unstructured FrameMaker and for structured FrameMaker authoring and structured FrameMaker development. And one last link here. I made reference to the Microsoft Word file that I used as my step-by-step guide throughout this presentation. If you'd like to download the PDF of that file, feel free to open up this QR code or this link. And as a thank you for signing up for the TechCom Tools community, I'll send you a PDF of that information. Also, if you'd like to use the Microsoft Word file itself to use in conversion, be happy to send that to you. So if you've already signed up for the community, go ahead and send me a text at the number that you see on the screen, and I will then forward you the actual docx file that I used in class today. Well, I hope you had as much fun today listening to this information as I had putting it together. This allowed me to go into some dusty corners that I haven't been in quite a while, especially in terms of setting up the templates for the book maps and the DITA maps that I showed you earlier. I'll be recording another installment of the FrameMaker Essentials series in just a couple of weeks. That session's going to be moving unstructured FrameMaker into DITA content, and we're going to use the conversion table options that are available inside of FrameMaker. So you're not going to want to miss that one too if you're already in FrameMaker and still are looking to move your information to DITA. Even if you miss that one, make sure that you don't miss DITA World 2025, the 10th edition of the DITA World Conference. I'm looking forward once again to co-hosting with Stefan Jentz, and this year's session promises to be every bit as jam-packed with information as the previous 9. So to wrap up, thank you so much for being here. Make sure that you sign up for the TechCom Tools community, get a copy of that PDF, reach out to me on any of the social networks where my username is Matt R. Sullivan. Thanks everybody, and I hope to talk to you soon.